The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the small backyard of Eleanor and Richard's home in Asheville, North Carolina, where the air carried the faint scent of blooming rhododendrons. At 63, Eleanor had always been the kind of woman who cherished the quiet moments, sipping chamomile tea on their porch swing, her hand resting in Richard's as they watched the world go by. Richard, 65, had been her rock for 38 years, his steady presence a comfort through every storm life had thrown their way. But lately, Eleanor had felt a subtle shift, a quiet distance that seemed to grow between them with each passing day. It wasn't that the love had faded, she still felt her heart flutter when Richard smiled at her, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners, but the effortless intimacy they'd once shared felt harder to grasp. At 63, Eleanor's body wasn't the ally it used to be. Her joints ached after a short walk, and fatigue seemed to settle in earlier each evening. Richard, too, had changed. He moved more slowly. His energy sapped by long days at the hardware store he still managed part-time. Their evenings, once filled with laughter and lingering touches, had become routine. Dinner, a bit of TV, and then off to bed, often on opposite sides of an invisible wall. Eleanor sighed, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup, wondering if this was just what love in old age looked like. But deep down, she wasn't ready to accept that intimacy had to be a thing of the past. She wanted more. She wanted to reignite the spark that had once burned so brightly between them. That longing led Eleanor to a quiet moment of reflection one crisp May morning in 2025, as she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. She'd stumbled across a video on YouTube titled 6 Surprising Secrets to Ignite Intimacy After 60. Discover now. Love in Old Age, uploaded by a channel called Inner Zen. The thumbnail showed a radiant couple holding hands in a sunlit park, a fiery heart glowing above them, and Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there were ways to bring back the closeness she and Richard had lost, not just physically, but emotionally, in the small, meaningful ways that had always defined their love. She clicked play, the narrator's warm voice filling the kitchen as she began to speak about how intimacy after 60 didn't have to fade, how it could be rekindled with intention and care. Eleanor leaned in, her curiosity piqued, as the video promised to share 6 secrets that could transform their relationship. She grabbed a notepad, determined to take in every word, her heart lifting at the thought that maybe, just maybe, she and Richard could find their way back to each other. The first secret the video revealed was the power of emotional vulnerability, a concept that struck Eleanor like a lightning bolt. The narrator explained that as we age, many couples over 60 build walls around their hearts, not out of a lack of love, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being seen as weak, fear of admitting that aging had changed them. But vulnerability, the narrator said, was the key to rebuilding emotional closeness. Eleanor thought of the last time she and Richard had truly opened up to each other, a memory that felt so distant it might as well have been from another lifetime. They'd been sitting on their porch swing 5 years ago, the night Richard's brother passed away, and he'd let his guard down, tears streaming down his face as he admitted how scared he was of losing the people he loved. Eleanor had held him close, her own tears falling as she whispered that she'd always be there, no matter what. That night, they'd felt closer than ever, their shared vulnerability a bridge between them. But in the years since, they'd fallen into a pattern of silence, tiptoeing around their fears instead of facing them head-on. Eleanor jotted down a note. Talk to Richard tonight. Be honest. Tell him how I feel. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the crickets began their nightly chorus, Eleanor took a deep breath and approached Richard, who was reading the newspaper in his favorite armchair. She sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee, and said softly, "Richard, I miss us. I miss the way we used to talk, really talk. I've been feeling so distant lately, and I'm scared we're losing what we had." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on, her eyes searching his. Richard set the paper down, his expression softening as he took her hand. "I felt it too, Ellie," he admitted, his voice low. "I didn't know how to say it. I'm scared too, scared I'm not enough for you anymore, that I can't be the man I used to be. The honesty in his words broke something open between them, and for the first time in months, they really talked, about their fears, their hopes, their love. Eleanor felt a weight lift from her chest, the invisible wall between them crumbling as they held each other close, their shared vulnerability reigniting a warmth that had been dormant for too long. The second secret the video shared was about the power of small gestures, those tiny acts of love that could make a big impact on a relationship. The narrator explained that intimacy after 60 wasn't always about grand romantic gestures. It was about the little things, the everyday moments that reminded your partner they were cherished. Eleanor thought of how she and Richard used to leave each other notes, silly little messages tucked into a lunchbox or slipped under a pillow, a habit that had faded over the years. She remembered the way Richard's face would light up when he found one of her notes, his laughter filling the room as he read her playful words. Inspired, Eleanor decided to revive that tradition. The next morning, while Richard was still asleep, she wrote a note on a sticky pad. "You're still the handsomest man I know. Love, Ellie." She tucked it into the pocket of his jacket, knowing he'd find it when he left for the store. When Richard came home that afternoon, his eyes were bright with a smile she hadn't seen in months. "Found your note," he said, pulling her into a hug. "Made my whole day." That small gesture sparked a chain reaction. Richard left a note for her the next day, and soon, their home was filled with these tiny tokens of love, each one a reminder of the bond they shared. Eleanor also began to incorporate other small gestures into their daily life, inspired by the video's advice. She'd reach for Richard's hand when they walked to the mailbox, her fingers intertwining with his in a way that felt both familiar and new. She'd make his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with a drizzle of maple syrup on a random Wednesday, just because she knew it would make him smile. Richard, in turn, started bringing her a single flower from the garden each evening, a daisy or a rose, his way of saying "I see you." These small acts of love became a language of their own, a way to bridge the gap that had grown between them. Eleanor noticed how Richard's posture seemed to lighten, how his laughter came more easily, and she felt her own heart lift in response. Intimacy, she realized, wasn't just about the physical, it was about these quiet moments of connection, the ones that reminded them both that they were still in this together, even after 38 years. The third secret was about prioritizing physical touch, a strategy that made Eleanor blush but also intrigued her. The narrator emphasized that physical touch didn't always mean sex. It could be as simple as a hug, a hand on the shoulder, or a gentle kiss on the forehead. After 60, the video explained, touch becomes even more important, triggering the release of oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, chemicals that reduce stress, boost mood, and strengthen emotional bonds. Eleanor thought of how she and Richard had drifted apart physically, not because they didn't want to be close, but because life had gotten in the way. They'd stopped holding hands, stopped cuddling on the couch, stopped sharing those small, affectionate touches that had once been second nature. Determined to change that, Eleanor started small. One evening, as they watched a rerun of their favorite show, she scooted closer to Richard on the couch, resting her head on his shoulder. He looked at her, surprised but pleased, and wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. The warmth of his embrace felt like coming home, and Eleanor felt a spark of intimacy reignite between them, a reminder of how powerful touch could be. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor and Richard made physical touch a priority, weaving it into their daily routine. They'd hug each other goodbye each morning, a lingering embrace that set the tone for the day. They'd hold hands while walking through the farmer's market on Saturdays, their fingers laced together as they picked out fresh peaches and chatted with vendors. At night, they'd cuddle in bed before sleep, their bodies pressed close as they talked about their day, their dreams, their love. Eleanor noticed how these touches changed them. Richard seemed more relaxed, his usual tension easing, and she felt a renewed sense of closeness, as if their bodies were remembering what their hearts had always known. The video had been right. Physical touch was a language of its own, one that spoke louder than words, and it was helping them rebuild the intimacy they'd thought was lost to time. The fourth secret was about communicating openly about desires, a topic that made Eleanor a little nervous but also excited her. The narrator explained that intimacy after 60 often required more intention, and that meant talking openly about what each partner wanted emotionally, physically, and even sexually. Eleanor and Richard had always been good at communicating about practical things, bills, schedules, family matters, but they'd rarely talked about their desires, especially as they'd aged. Eleanor realized she'd been holding back, afraid to admit that she missed the physical side of their relationship, afraid that Richard might feel pressured or inadequate. But the video encouraged honesty, emphasizing that open communication could build trust and deepen connection. So one quiet evening over a glass of wine, Eleanor gathered her courage and broached the subject. "Richard," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I miss being close to you, really close. I know things have changed for both of us, but I'd love to find a way to bring that back. What do you think?" Richard looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and relief, and after a moment, he nodded. "I miss it too, Ellie," he said. "I just didn't know how to say it. I've been worried I can't, keep up anymore." That conversation opened a door between them, one they hadn't realized had been closed for so long. They talked about what they each wanted, what felt good, what they were comfortable with at this stage in their lives. Richard admitted he'd been feeling self-conscious about his body, worried that he couldn't be the man he'd been in his 40s, but he still wanted to be close to Eleanor in whatever way they could manage. Eleanor shared that she craved more affection, more moments of tenderness, and that she was open to exploring what physical intimacy might look like for them now. They decided to take things slow, to focus on enjoying each other's company without pressure, and to keep talking as they went. That openness brought a new kind of intimacy to their relationship, one built on trust and understanding. Eleanor felt a thrill of excitement as they kissed goodnight that evening, a kiss that lingered a little longer, a little deeper than it had in years. Communication, she realized, was the key to unlocking the passion they'd both been missing. The fifth secret was about rediscovering shared hobbies, a suggestion that lit up Eleanor's imagination. The video explained that couples over 60 often drift apart because they stop doing things together, their lives consumed by routine rather than shared experiences. But finding a hobby to enjoy as a couple could reignite that sense of partnership, bringing back the fun and connection that had drawn them together in the first place. Eleanor thought back to the early days of their marriage when she and Richard had loved to garden together, their hands in the dirt as they planted tomatoes and marigolds, laughing as they sprayed each other with the hose on hot summer days. They'd stopped gardening years ago, their backyard now a patch of overgrown grass. But the memory of those days filled Eleanor with nostalgia. She decided to surprise Richard with a new project. They'd planned a small herb garden together, something simple they could nurture side by side. The next weekend, Eleanor drove to the local nursery, picking out pots of basil, rosemary, and thyme, along with a few bags of soil and a pair of gardening gloves for each of them. When she showed Richard the supplies, his face lit up with a boyish grin. "You remembered," he said, pulling her into a hug. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, the sun warm on their shoulders as they worked together, their hands brushing as they scooped soil into pots and planted the herbs. Richard teased her about her uneven rows, and Eleanor splashed him with a bit of water from the watering can, their laughter echoing through the yard. As they worked, Eleanor felt a sense of partnership she hadn't realized she'd been missing, a reminder of how much joy they could find in each other's company. That evening, they sat on the porch swing, admiring their little garden, their hands intertwined as they sipped iced tea. Rediscovering this shared hobby had brought them closer, reigniting the playful, joyful connection they'd always cherished. Eleanor made a mental note to find other activities they could enjoy together, maybe a cooking class, or a weekly hike in the Blue Ridge Mountains, knowing that these shared experiences would keep their intimacy alive. The sixth and final secret was about taking care of their health together, a strategy that resonated deeply with Eleanor. The video emphasized that intimacy after 60 wasn't just about emotional connection, it was also about physical well-being. Aging brought new challenges, from fatigue to chronic conditions, and those could take a toll on a couple's closeness if left unaddressed. But by prioritizing health as a team, couples could support each other in feeling their best, paving the way for a more vibrant love life. Eleanor thought of Richard's recent checkup, where his doctor had mentioned high cholesterol and a need for more exercise, concerns he'd brushed off with a shrug. She'd been worried about her own health too. Her doctor had suggested more movement to help with her joint pain, but she'd been too tired to follow through. Inspired by the video, Eleanor proposed a plan. They'd start walking together each morning, a gentle way to get moving and spend time together. The next morning, Eleanor and Richard laced up their sneakers and set out for a walk around their neighborhood, the early sun casting long shadows on the pavement. They started slow, their pace leisurely as they took in the sights, the blooming dogwoods, the neighbor's cat lounging on a fence, the sound of birds chirping overhead. At first, Eleanor's knees protested, but as they walked, she felt her body loosen up, the fresh air filling her lungs with a sense of vitality. Richard reached for her hand, his grip steady, and they talked as they walked, sharing stories and dreams in a way they hadn't in months. Those morning walks became a ritual, a time for them to connect while taking care of their health, and Eleanor noticed the difference almost immediately. She felt more energized, her joint pain easing with each passing day, and Richard seemed more vibrant too, his steps lighter, his mood brighter. They started cooking healthier meals together, swapping out fried foods for grilled vegetables and lean proteins, and they made a point to check in with each other about their health, encouraging one another to keep up with doctor's appointments and medications. Taking care of their health together wasn't just about feeling better physically, it was about showing each other that they cared, that they wanted to be there for each other for as long as possible. And that, Eleanor realized, was the foundation of true intimacy. As the weeks turned into months, Eleanor and Richard's relationship blossomed in ways they hadn't thought possible at this stage in their lives. The 6 secrets they learned from the Inner Zen video had transformed their connection, bringing them closer emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Emotional vulnerability had opened their hearts, allowing them to share their fears and hopes with a raw honesty that deepened their bond. Small gestures had become a daily reminder of their love, filling their home with notes and touches that spoke volumes. Prioritizing physical touch had reignited a warmth between them, their hugs and hand-holding a language of affection that needed no words. Communicating openly about their desires had brought a new level of trust and understanding, making their physical intimacy more meaningful, even if it looked different than it had in their younger years. Rediscovering shared hobbies had reminded them of the joy of partnership, their herb garden a symbol of the life they were still building together. And taking care of their health as a team had given them the energy and vitality to enjoy each other fully, proving that love in old age could be vibrant and fulfilling. One evening, as they sat on their porch swing, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange, Eleanor looked at Richard and felt a surge of gratitude. They'd been through so much together, raising 2 children, navigating career changes, weathering the loss of loved ones, and yet here they were, still finding new ways to love each other at 63 and 65. Richard reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a familiar, comforting gesture, and Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder, the warmth of his body a steady presence beside her. "I love you, Ellie," he said softly, his voice filled with a tenderness that made her heart swell. "I love you too," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. They sat there in silence, the crickets singing around them, and Eleanor knew that this was what intimacy after 60 was all about, not just the physical, but the emotional, the spiritual, the quiet moments of connection that made life so rich. Their journey wasn't without its challenges, of course. There were days when Eleanor's joint pain flared up, or when Richard's fatigue made him withdraw, but they faced those moments together, armed with the tools they'd learned. They kept talking, kept touching, kept finding ways to laugh and play, even when life felt heavy. They joined a local senior center, where they met other couples over 60 who were navigating the same challenges, and those friendships became a source of support and inspiration. Eleanor and Richard even started hosting a monthly date night for their new friends, where they'd share a meal, play board games, and swap stories about love and old age, their laughter filling the room as they toasted to aging gracefully. Through it all, Eleanor felt a sense of purpose, a reminder that love wasn't something that faded with time. It was something that grew, evolved, and deepened if you were willing to nurture it. Reflecting on their journey, Eleanor often thought back to that May morning when she'd watched the Inner Zen video, a moment that had changed everything for her and Richard. Those 6 secrets had been more than just tips. They'd been a roadmap to a more fulfilling love life, a guide to navigating the complexities of intimacy after 60 with grace and intention. Emotional vulnerability had taught them to be honest, to let each other in even when it was hard. Small gestures had reminded them to show their love in the everyday, to never take each other for granted. Physical touch had brought them back to each other's bodies, a reminder of the power of affection. Open communication had given them the courage to share their desires, to build a new kind of intimacy that fit who they were now. Shared hobbies had reignited their partnership, filling their days with joy and laughter. And prioritizing their health had given them the energy to keep going, to keep loving, to keep living fully in their golden years. One sunny afternoon, as Eleanor and Richard walked hand in hand through the Blue Ridge Mountains, a hike they'd added to their weekly routine, Eleanor felt a sense of peace settle over her. The trail was lined with wildflowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the green of the forest, and the air was fresh with the scent of pine. Richard stopped to pick a daisy, tucking it behind her ear with a grin, and Eleanor laughed, the sound echoing through the trees. They sat on a bench overlooking a valley, the mountains stretching out before them in a breathtaking vista, and Eleanor leaned into Richard's side, her heart full. At 63 and 65, they discovered that love in old age wasn't about trying to be young again. It was about embracing who they were now, with all the wisdom and experience that came with age, and finding new ways to connect, to love, to thrive. The 6 secrets had shown them that intimacy after 60 wasn't a thing of the past. It was a flame that could burn brighter than ever, if you were willing to tend to it. Their story wasn't unique, of course. Across the country, thousands of couples over 60 were facing the same challenges, the same quiet distances that could grow if left unchecked. But Eleanor and Richard's journey was a testament to what was possible, a reminder that love in old age could be just as passionate, just as meaningful as it had been in their younger years. They learned to prioritize intimacy, to build emotional closeness, to create a deeper connection that transcended the physical and touched the very core of who they were. And in doing so, they'd found a love that was richer, deeper, more fulfilling than they'd ever imagined possible. As they sat on that bench, the sun warm on their faces, Eleanor knew that their best years weren't behind them. They were right here, right now, unfolding with every shared smile, every gentle touch, every moment of love they chose to create together. For anyone over 60 reading their story, Eleanor and Richard's journey offers a beacon of hope, a reminder that intimacy doesn't have to fade with age. It can grow, evolve, and deepen if you're willing to put in the work. The 6 secrets they discovered: emotional vulnerability, small gestures, physical touch, open communication, shared hobbies, and prioritizing health aren't just strategies, they're invitations to live more fully, to love more deeply, to age with grace and joy. So, the next time you feel like intimacy is a thing of the past, think of Eleanor and Richard, and know that it's never too late to reignite the spark. Take a moment to be vulnerable with your partner, to leave them a note, to hold their hand, to share your desires, to find a hobby you love, to take care of your health together. Love in old age is a beautiful, vibrant thing, and it's yours for the taking if you're ready to discover it.